I mean, part of it could also be just when it comes to like blood. I'm typically pretty okay with blood, but like, ironically, the first like 20 minutes of Hacksaw Ridge was really hard to watch for me because there's a lot of needles, and I don't like needles. Like, he gets his blood drawn.
The needles and not the war.
It's for whatever reason, it was a lot of needles, and there wasn't like a precursor to it. It was just like suddenly needle, and I'm like, this sucks.
I do remember the one, the flesh squeeze and the morphine poke, like
when he's up on the ridge and he's doing it like, here's some morphine, I can look away. I don't have to watch that. This is moving away now into my fear of needles rather than other things. But like, I mean, it's like the first 20 minutes of Hacksaw Ridge was rough. That plus there was feeling, and I don't like feelings.
Oh no, we're men. We don't feel anything.
It's foreign to me, hence why I don't want to watch it.
You need carbs!
May thy knife chip and shatter.
There is beauty in imperfections.
You're great. I am.
And if you feel it, are you watching closely?
I do think that this is probably the first time. Is it a new matchup?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Because I've done one with Deacon. Have we done one in like where it's like a really big episode where it's most of the podcast?
Isaac has done one with Josh and Deacon and Zach.
I don't know if I've done one with you though. Man, that's interesting.
There you go. So I got a question because I was very vague about this episode for you guys. What did you do to prepare for this episode?
I'm gonna be honest, not much.
Okay.
Because it's mostly just drawing on the fact that I've watched a good amount of like those type of films, because like, you know, like they're ones that like my family has watched occasionally. Because for growing up is either like westerns, and that's pretty much it, or like Disney stuff, and then like as you get a little older, you're like able to watch a bit more stuff, and so that's just kind of the same thing. So.
Yeah. Isaac, what about you?
I watched Hacksaw Ridge.
Okay.
And I have watched some other war movies, and I have opinions on watching war movies that I believe I may have told Seth already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've actually watched Hacksaw Ridge, not in theaters, although I think some of my family did. I'm not sure who. But we watched it as a family on our big screen. Like as a whole family all together one time. So that's going to be one thing I'll definitely be drawing on.
Let's see. What all is in shot if I start talking? Nothing incriminating.
Your last name's still hidden. I've been trying my best to keep you guys non-doxed, or not necessarily doxed, but like...
Well, you have to be big enough first, so...
Yeah.
when we reach the point... We'll know we're big when we reach the point when you have crazy fans.
Well, the chance that we have hit 1,000 subs on YouTube by the time this episode comes out is very high. So if you want to consider that big, there you go.
Which is crazy, because like, what was it at the start of the year?
Start of the year was like 500-ish.
Oh, really?
And it was the Arcane reel that popped off with 1.6 million views that got us like 400 subscribers.
I still find that funny. Like that's just like the one time we have like the girls on, and it's like basically you, and that's it. That's the only core member of the podcast, technically speaking.
I've been doing some subtle tests, quote unquote. So we've started kind of a clips thing on the channel as well, with only like sections of the podcast, and sometimes those are popular, sometimes they're not. But I want to do one of the tests I want to do is a girls only episode, which they've expressed interest in. It's either going to be their own soundtrack episode or My Little Pony and Miraculous combo episode, because apparently they say that there's enough to talk about and fill a whole episode. And that would probably be like Anna, Ellie, and Michael.
Oh boy. Okay, here's the thing. I've said this to you as a joke. But legitimately, if you put Josh and I, we could legitimately talk about like all of the animated Barbie movies, because we had older sisters and we have watched like all of them. And so, like seriously, like him, Mermaid is still the best. Him and I both agree on this, by the way. So,
yeah,
I have younger sisters, and the amount of Barbie movies that I watched was unbelievable.
Yeah. The earlier ones would definitely peak, but they kind of got meh after like 2010. They just went downhill, but.
Although I will say their naming system leaves a bit to be desired. Like Barbie, Fairytopia, Mermaidia, rescuing the unicorn of destiny.
It's not supposed to be subtle, you know. It's not supposed to be subtle. That's not their point.
How many Barbie movies are there?
There's 26, I thought. So there was like 20 or something like that. There's a lot.
No, it says at least the one side says 44, one says 52. I'm seeing more 52. Actually, no, that's Wikipedia. That's from Wikipedia, so that could count the Barbie movie itself, not the genre from 2001 to 2009.
And there's like a lot of like short mini series as well that are kind of they are often there's a lot of different things for what you can count that as, yes, but yeah, there's a lot.
Sure.
Also, they left a lot of cliffhangers lying around, so you gotta tie off loose ends.
Well, thank you guys for joining and talking about Barbie for a little bit. Maybe the more I learn about the co-hosts who have watched Barbie, the more I'm okay having some or all of you doing a Barbie episode just for kicks and giggles.
I think it would make you could almost do like an April Fool's type of thing for that, and I think it would be kind of funny because I can legitimately have opinions on it because I've seen so many of them.
Isaac, are you okay? I know we might be loud, but you grimaced, you winced for a second there.
Every syllable is pain.
So when I'm adjusting the volume on my computer, it doesn't change the volume of you guys.
Interesting. So like the master volume of your computer.
Correct. It doesn't affect you. Right now you seem fine.
Okay.
Okay, because I've turned mine down, so hopefully that'll help a little bit.
Yeah. If you see me recoil, just don't put that in the episode.
Will do. You need that.
Don't.
They say words have power. This time they do.
They have power to make me deaf.
Deafen, yeah.
Deaf and mute, because apparently that's...
Hey now.
For all of our blind listeners.
No. I misspoke, okay?
No. Oh, what's the joke? No, it's for all of our deaf listeners. There you go.
Josh had a better joke further in the episode. Isaac, William, did you see the video part of it, or did you just listen to it?
Which one?
The Arcane episode with Josh joking about deaf and blind people.
I think I was for that particular one. I was listening to it, an audio version.
Okay, so there's a visual gag when he talks about blind people. That there's a little Easter egg there. So if anyone wants to go find that, that'd be really funny.
So I will say I am totally invested in this episode. However, the USA and Canada are playing, and there were 3 fights in 9 seconds. So
Three fights in 9 seconds?
It's going to be off in the corner.
Is that boxing or
just
what?
for fights? Hockey.
It's hockey. Well, the first game they had, there was 3 fights in 5 minutes, but that was kind of because there was 2 fights and then 1 fight. But still, 9 seconds?
9 seconds.
Well,
so,
you know what they say. I went to a fight last night and a hockey game broke out. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. It's great.
That's quite literally a dad joke because my dad told us that. So
what are you watching it on, or what is it on?
It's on my phone. It's on ESPN Plus and Disney Plus.
Oh, you have ESPN Plus. Okay.
I'm special like that.
Yeah, well, you're a sports guy.
Yeah,
well, need it.
That and my dad and I watch UFC, so we actually watch people beat each other up intentionally.
Yeah.
I just have to go every day to the mall and see that. So,
dang. I mean, I risk it every day working at the parking office. Like I could just walk outside and just somebody just sucker punch me and
you gave me a ticket.
How dare you?
How dare you?
Okay.
So
we are kind of making this episode into an umbrella of talking about war movies in general, but we'll mainly be talking about Hacksaw Ridge. One of my favorite movies of all time, maybe? It's up there.
Really?
Mostly because it's... my dad really likes war movies. He has Saving Private Ryan, a number of other DVDs. My grandpa was in Okinawa, and so actually Hacksaw Ridge is very close to my heart because you can see, as they're landing on Okinawa, you can see LST landing ship tanks out in the ocean, and my grandpa was on one of those.
Cool.
So a little bit of a connection there. And then also just Desmond Doss, the whole point of his story is that he is a man of faith who won't pick up a gun, and it's inspiring. And Mel Gibson doing it, he also did Passion of the Christ. He has a faith background. It's Catholic, but he respects that immensely and made sure that was essential to the story. And I think that that's so charming, even if you're not a Christian. I guess I haven't watched it from that perspective, but I still believe that affects people who have no faith in that, who have no shared faith as we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had some Seventh-day Adventist friends who really liked the movie because he was a Seventh-day Adventist, and that's like one of their principles that they believe in. So
yeah, I mean, I think I can understand why. It's just because like he stays so strongly to what he believes, regardless of regardless of what everyone else the world is telling him to do. He remains rooted in what he knows and what he believes.
Yeah. One of his quotes is, "I don't know how I'm going to live with myself if I don't stay true to what I believe." Like that just shows his deep dissatisfaction with even the thought of giving up on this. And it's shown not only through the war scenes where he's saving people as a medic, but he's also, when people are beating him up more or less, and he just goes to bed, and the sergeant just says, "What happened?" He's like, "I fell." He's like, "I'm not going to cause trouble. I'm not going to point blame. I'm just going to," what's the phrase? Is it "take your lumps"? I feel like that's a really old.
Take the punches as they come or something like that, maybe.
Yeah. "Take your lumps" is a phrase. To be criticized or beaten as a punishment. That's so weird.
I mean, the other thing about Hacksaw Ridge is that it's a great movie, like just in regards to acting and visuals and all of that, and cinematography and all the technical side of that. It's a great film. And again, when I watched it with my family, it's a great film when you don't say anything and you focus completely on the movie itself. And that happened with like the one scene that everyone knows if you watch it, where he reaches like that point where he's up on the top of the hill, and it has that sequence where he's saving guys and he's throwing them, sending them down with the rope, and you see his hands burning. He's saying one more, over and over and over again. Like that scene was so powerful. And I don't say that lightly, because I think I've mentioned it before in other episodes, but I generally am not emotionally affected by most films. Like it takes a lot to stir something in me. Like I can watch most films and enjoy it, but it's not, it doesn't usually have that much depth. Usually doesn't strike that deeply into me, you could say, but this one really did, and so I think that can really speak to the great care that this film was made with, and how good of a job it does. Because like when you reach the point where like you are focused completely on this one scenario, and this guy who is like pretty much generally doing a miracle right now, saving so many people throughout an entire night, and just like the turmoil and the struggle that he goes through it at the end, and all it's incredible. So yeah, it's a good film, and it's also a very good Christian film, I would say, as well, which is for all the reasons you've pointed out to. And that's a very weird thing to say, because it is a war movie, but it's also a Christian film. In the sense that it's portraying Christianity and somebody who follows a belief system in Christianity, and how that motivates and impacts them, and the impact that he has, and the miracle that he performs essentially by like surviving on top of that cliff. So it's a weird thing to kind of have those two be combined, because like when you think of the Christianity, at least in like a bit more of a popular setting, you think of like, it's not always, but you usually tend to think of more like fluffy peace and love type of an idea of compassion and tolerance and all of those things. And those are components of the Christian faith. But that's like, I think this film does a very good job at portraying the depth. How do I want to word this? I think this film does a really good job at portraying like the depth that a faith can have and the impact that it can have. But like, there's like a lot you can unpack with that, just for like, the Christianity and war movies and how exactly we should relate about that. Because I'm assuming, Isaac, that you have some thoughts about this.
I mean, we can do it right away. My thoughts with war movies is basically, I will watch a war movie once, and that will basically be it. For a combination of reasons, but really just in my head, there's something about like the knowledge of what these guys went through and just seeing it visually like put on a screen. That way it's not just in my head. Like I'm seeing a representation of what actually happened. And I don't get me wrong. I have nothing but appreciation for everybody who's ever fought for our country. Like I don't have the I don't have the guts to do that. I don't think. Maybe I do. As of right now, I haven't really discovered that. But there's something about seeing that I can't watch it again. Like you said, there's like an emotional almost rejection to it. Like I will watch it once. I will watch it for the sake of making myself understand further what they went through and what happened. And then after that, I'm like, I don't want to watch it again. I just don't like it.
I wonder if that's like a sort of reverence thing. Would that be a right word to kind of describe it? How you're feeling, or sort of like where it's like, you're watching it once and you're seeing it, but like maybe like watching it over and over again is more of just like why are you watching it over and over again? Just because of the cheap entertainment value versus maybe having a bit more of the respect, I suppose, for what the people which this film is ostensibly portraying. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but is that kind of how you're thinking about it? Maybe.
I don't know 100% because like I have respect for what they do. And part of watching it is also like I go into it with the understanding of like I'm showing as much respect as I can as of right now to what they're doing. I mean, part of it could also be just when it comes to like blood. I'm typically pretty okay with blood. But like, ironically, the first like 20 minutes of Hacksaw Ridge was really hard to watch for me because there's a lot of needles, and I don't like needles. Like he gets his blood drawn.
The needles and not the war.
it's for whatever reason it was a lot of needles, and there wasn't like a precursor to it. It was just like suddenly needle, and I'm like, this sucks.
I do remember the one the flesh squeeze and the morphine poke, like
when he's up on the ridge and he's doing it like here's some morphine, I can look away. I don't have to watch that. This is moving away now into my fear of needles rather than other things. But like I mean, it's like the first 20 minutes of Hacksaw Ridge was rough. That plus there was feeling, and I don't like feelings.
Oh no, we're men. We don't feel anything.
It's foreign to me, hence why I don't want to watch it.
I wonder if that's like a temperance thing or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm not the type of person who's like, oh yes, I just want to watch like dead bodies and dismember and stuff like that. But I feel like it doesn't faze me as much. Like if you watch another Mel Gibson film like called The Patriot, that's another one where like there's just like a cannonball just takes a guy's head right off. Like that doesn't really faze me as much. And maybe that's part of my maybe growing up on a farm a little bit as well.
You kill cows for a living.
That's true. So that might play into it. I don't know. I think that's again maybe a part of a personal like what you can handle. And I mean, I don't think like it sounds like you're not like I can't handle it. It's just like it's I don't care as much to rewatch that over and over again. Maybe
bodies I'm fine with. Like there are scenes in the movies where there's like grossly disfigured bodies and like a guy's head gets chopped off. Like I'm fine with that. I might look away because I don't really want to see someone's head get chopped off in front of me, but like I'm fine with bodies. That's not really an issue. Like why am I blanking on the name? I should know. Saving Private Ryan. There we go. The opening scene for that. Mm-hmm. I was, for the most part, I was fine with that. I mean, the needles sucked, but I mean,
it's always the needles.
That's one of the worst parts about war movies is the needles. I can't do it.
That's funny. It's kind of funny to me that like it's needles that because I'm like it's not like I like needles, but just like that. That's just I don't know. I wouldn't have really thought that people really don't like those, but I guess
I'm rolling it back a little bit because I brought up Mel Gibson as the director. Will brought up another one of his movies, and we had talked about the Passion of the Christ for 2024 Easter with Josh and Isaac. And Isaac, you had said your dad doesn't want to watch Passion of the Christ.
Yes.
And then Will brought up the term, what did you say?
Reverence?
Yeah, a reverence. And so I wonder if that's something that Isaac is experiencing. Partly, I can admit, there's also when it comes to war movies, you don't want to indulge in it and enjoy it almost, because of how good it is at displaying war. And that's the point, is it's not supposed to be entertaining. And same with Passion of the Christ. I don't think that's meant to be entertaining. It's just supposed to show you the harsh reality.
Well, I think that's kind of like the crux of the difficulty is like, you know, what is the point where like you can watch a war movie or what even qualifies as that, where it's fine, acceptable to like indulge in that and find like a story that's about battles and wars entertaining versus like when it's not. Like, where exactly is that line? I think that's difficult to say. For example, you guys both like Star Wars. And you wouldn't say like, and like Star Wars is like a lot about like lightsabers and battles. And like, it's like whenever like, especially because we're boys and or maybe young men, we're working on it. We're boys. But like, you know, it's like every like boy is like, oh, I have a stick and it's actually a sword and I'm leading a super cool army and I'm fighting this bad guy and like, oh, I stab him and he dies. It's like it obviously it's not like as graphic as like you can actually imagine, but like that's like a very like, you know, a masculine thing, I guess, is just to imagine like fighting and battles and wars and stuff like that. So, and I wouldn't necessarily say that in and of itself is inherently wrong. But like kind of like where exactly is the line for that? And I think kind of for me, a good metric, generally speaking, is like, you know, PG versus rated R. Again, that's a different metric. But like if it's like showing like graphic death and it's like saying like, you know, this is an actual historical account, or even if it's just even if it's like a fantasy or sci-fi thing, if it's like trying to portray this as not a positive thing, then that's, I think, a different scenario. Whereas like, again, like Star Wars is like, I mean, you know, if you really think about it, like, that's like a pretty brutal war going on all the time, but like we're not necessarily supposed to feel bad, like, you know, so many stormtroopers are dying or that the Death Star blows up and like kills how many people. Like, so, you know, I think that's a kind of a difficulty, especially for like Christians, because it's like, okay, we don't want to be indulging in like sin per se, which is like, oh yes, people are dying and I enjoy this. Like, that's not a good thing. But at the same time, like there, like in the Bible, for example, there's a lot of like narratives and myths about like fighting and war, and like, you know, Revelations is very kind of graphic as well. I think we're probably going to talk about this throughout the rest of the episode, but just like I think there is a level of like, you know, you can watch like something like The Lord of the Rings, like that has a lot of like fighting and stuff like that. And I think you can watch that for entertainment because like, you know, it's entertaining to like imagine like battles and fighting and wars and stuff like that. Like as a kid, like I used to draw battle plans all the time because, you know, that was fun to me. But I think that you also have to recognize the difference between what that actually is like in real life, and, you know, and you kind of have to be a little careful that you're not like indulging in that. And where that is, again, I can't necessarily say. That's a hard like line to exactly figure out. And I think that's maybe a personal thing as well, but you know, it's a hard thing to figure out exactly like where is it acceptable to continue to indulge in like, you know, acts of like fighting or stories of fighting and violence and stuff like that. Where are the acceptable parameters for that? And I don't know, maybe you guys got some better thoughts on that, but I don't know.
Well, I think it's all about your heart. I think it'd be pretty hard to acknowledge or to have the idea that you're watching these movies because you enjoy seeing bodies maimed and shot and all that. Oh my goodness. But it's it's other reasons. I would watch Hacksaw. I actually just bought it. I bought the DVD for this episode so that I could have it and reference it. It's good because I like the aspect of the Christian convictions being so prevalent, and I also enjoy sharing movies, so that's why I bought it. But there's other movies, like I'm thinking Saving Private Ryan is known as, you know, the peak war movie. That's more for that wow factor of, ooh, this is war. I actually don't know much more about it after that. I don't know if Ryan gets saved. I'm just saying. I can't even use the excuse that I was homeschooled because my dad owns it and he just never watched it with me. But that's the most that I know, and that it's, yeah. Anyways, I think also about 13 Hours. 13 Hours is a really good movie that's on Prime, at least for now. That is, I would watch for the brotherhood aspect. It's like 5 or 6 guys who were in Benghazi recently. It was, I don't remember what year it was, but it was more recent than not. And they dramatized it and told it's more about strategy. That's more of a strategy thing, and they're working together. They're a band of brothers, and it's just fun to watch that aspect. What is Isaac? No, Isaac is having a James Earl Jones played Mufasa moment where he's like, oh, "What? I just discovered something."
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I was doing the funny moments episode, and you were like, "James Earl Jones played Mufasa."
I don't really want to relive that because that was some ugly sound. Oh my gosh, it is.
What?
Huh.
Oh, on Prime.
I didn't know. I didn't.
Had you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the ones that I wanted to watch that I didn't.
Oh, okay. Sure. That's why I was wondering why you were so interested. Is like, was it Benghazi? Was it John Krasinski? Was it?
No, I thought I couldn't watch it.
Yeah, I haven't watched that one, but I did actually watch Black Hawk Down with my family as well, which is another kind of like similar thing where it's like very like intense. It reaches the point. I think that's one of the better things about like war films is that they can be very good at showing like the intenseness that these guys are just going through with also if you have really good actors especially and just like dang, that's war. Like that's what I think. I've talked about this before, and when we talked about like some of the history movies that we've watched, and again as someone who has a degree in history and I can throw that around a little bit, there's very much a difference between like reading something and actually being able to visualize it, even if like those visuals aren't always perfect. And any good historical film, and that includes historical war films, should strive to be accurate within the range of acceptability. But there's something so much more powerful with like watching Hacksaw Ridge than just like reading, these sources say that the private did this and this, and he saved 250 men or whatever, and he, in all these incredible things, whatever. Just throwing that out. It's so much more powerful if you actually watch it in person, and you can actually see what that looked like and like empathize and understand and actually understand. That's also part of the reason why I kind of like to watch medieval films if possible, because then you can actually see how medieval combat is actually engaged in and fighting and stuff like that, and how brutal that was as well. And that's also because of my personal bias towards the Middle Ages, but that's neither here nor there.
Crusades for life, baby.
Well,
I don't know if I go that far.
I did my dissertation. I did my thesis. Yes, my thesis on one of the Fourth Crusades, and it's a complicated time. Let's just say people really knew how to kill each other. Yeah,
for sure. Well, one thing I wanted to comment on is not only showing the brutality of war, but World War II war. And I think watching war movies from different eras is also important to visualize. Like I can read about the different gear that they had, the different different guns and different things like the flamethrowers, things like that are unique to that era. And sometimes it shows things like how their helmets worked. I don't think that was really the case in World War II World War I that they had as bulletproof of helmets. And so there was a one time when the guy got shot in the helmet and then he took it off and then got shot in the head. Like that's something that would happen in World War II that wouldn't really happen anywhere else. And that's different from like 13 Hours, where it's a very modern take on it's a very modern story. And it's just different. Even the way that they treated wounded in the field is just stick them with morphine, get them out of the way as soon as possible. And it's just a lot more gritty, and yet it's not super old like World War I or even the Civil War. It's just, I don't know. It's interesting to me.
I do like what you said, Seth, about it being like, I think being able to look at war movies from different time periods is a really interesting thing. Like, what was the Glory? A movie about a black regiment in the Civil War.
Oh,
it's very interesting to see, like, not only how it's portrayed just with the time of when it was created, but also just like how the battles went. It's so different to see how the battles went then versus, I mean, honestly, if we're talking about war movies, why the heck have we not talked about Braveheart?
Yeah,
technically that's a war. Like there's the differences between them is really interesting. And again, like in my head, it's a case of like these, like the men that are being portrayed in these movies are actual men that have fought and died. Like, the way that they die is gruesome and bloody and awful. And I don't want us to have another war. I don't want that. But it's a case of like this is what happens in war. This is war. It's very interesting, honestly.
Well, and I think this is kind of the difficulty of and again, kind of going back to like the guy thing where it's like, you know, like there's like this innate sense of like guys, of men specifically, kind of like just like having like an urge to be like warriors or whatever, and there's like this there's like a paradox of sorts where it's like there's like the glorification of war, but there's also the hatred or the disgust of war, and there's like this. I think like with like all guys, like you can kind of understand and relate to that a little bit, where it's like, you know, there's an attraction to like fighting and like fighting the good fight and slaying the bad guys and doing all that sort of thing. There's also like, okay, but because of the 21st century and like the horrors of the world wars specifically kind of shattered all of the illusions of the dreams of glory that you can have in war. Like there is no glorification in war generally, especially in like the West, like that those died in the trenches of Verdun and the invasion of Japan and Russia and all of that. Like the Western media particularly, like, we don't want to glorify that, generally speaking. But at the same time, there's still like this urge and like an innate desire to kind of almost have that, and it's like this paradoxical thing, especially when you start considering again, you know, what does the Bible teach and like what does Christ teach, and you know the whole concept of loving thy neighbor. But at the same time, in the Old Testament, like the Israelites were like literally told to engage in fighting as well. So there's a kind of that tension that I think that exists that's difficult to unravel about like war movies, and you know, I've already mentioned it about like, you know, what's acceptable and what's not, and that's a difficult thing to say. And I think it's going to be a bit of a personal thing. But that's kind of the theme that I'm picking up throughout a lot of this talking is, you know, what is acceptable for war? Like, should we just like totally say it's all bad? But at the same time, you know, sometimes you need to fight. And like, there's also like a desire to just like, you know, there is like this weird desire to glorify war, whether in propaganda from state propaganda or just, you know, just like stories that we write and produce and about them. I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
I think something that this movie resulted in me thinking about, which I think probably quite a few other people who watch this movie, is like, what is my take on it? If worse comes to worse, would I be able to pick up a weapon and, you know, kill someone else? Is it? And I don't know. I think that it's a combination of our understanding of what Christ teaches us. And what I might think that Christ has taught me might be different from what Seth thinks. Seth might think similar to Desmond Doss, and he's like, I can't pick up a weapon and kill someone. And I'm like, I think it's perfectly justifiable. I don't know. It's one of those things that I think maybe each person has to wrestle with and struggle with to come to terms.
Yeah.
I think there was a Adventures in Odyssey episode, believe it or not, about Sergeant York, which followed a very similar story. He was a conscientious objector, although he went into a lot more of the mentality of, like, legitimately, I'm taking away someone's father for the sake of my country, and it follows a very similar story, I would say, but he actually decided to fight and ended up, again, saving a lot of people, not as a medic, but as a soldier. So it's a little twist on, there were many people who were conscientious objectors in the war. And it's interesting to hear two different sides of the story.
I'm just waiting for the next like Hacksaw Ridge type of style based on Sergeant York, because his story, I think, it's like equal amounts of like interest and coolness, you could say, I suppose, because like he like somebody who starts off as like, I don't want to fight, to like being the person who ends up like almost single-handedly, not like fully, but like almost single-handedly like capturing an entire German battalion of like 400 guys. It's kind of crazy, but that's different. That's an entirely different thing.
Yeah, there's a lot more that we could say about war movies, and we can still throw it in a little bit every once in a while, but the actual movie of Hacksaw Ridge is so gripping, the way they wrote it. Again, it doesn't have to be from the diary of Desmond Doss to be the same story. Like, it's still the same essence. And the part that's the twist for Doss is when he is bringing the one guy to the ridge, which I think the ridge is a great backdrop. Like, obviously it actually happened, but it's a great place for a story to understand the limitations, the scope and the high stakes of the situation. But also when he gets there and the guy has died, he feels like such a failure. And that's what causes him to start his Lord, please, just one more. Help me get one more. And it doesn't stop all night. And I don't know. That's just, again, I would say inspiring.
I have facts.
You have facts.
Interested. I have facts.
Yeah, okay.
The Hacksaw Ridge, I guess, is a 100-foot cliff face.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it looked like that in the movie to you. It looked tall to me. But basically, in one day and night, Desmond Doss saved 75 men, including some Japanese soldiers as well. He got them down off of the ridge. Mm-hmm. He claims he saved 50. Witnesses and bystanders claim it was more like 100, and I guess it was settled somewhere around the middle at 75. And that was just in like one day and one night.
Yeah.
The events take place very quickly. He was 26 at Hacksaw Ridge. So when that happened, he was age 26. Yeah. Over 3 weeks of service that included Hacksaw Ridge, he saved roughly 300 men. Wow. He was, as you saw at the end of the movie, he was awarded a Medal of Honor. And part of the Medal of Honor was actually when he got blown up by the grenade. What they didn't show in the movie is when he got blown up, and this is coming straight from the Medal of Honor website and his entry with it, rather than call another aid man from cover, he cared for his own injuries and waited 5 hours before litter bearers reached him and started carrying him to cover. The trio was caught in an enemy tank attack, and Private First Class Doss, seeing a more critically wounded man nearby, crawled off of the litter and directed the bearers to give their attention to the other man. Awaiting the litter, he was struck again, this time suffering a compound fracture of one arm. With magnificent fortitude, he bound a rifle stock to his shattered arm as a splint and crawled 300 yards over rough terrain. Not only that, I don't know the exact source on this, but supposedly multiple times while Doss was getting people over the edge of the ridge, there was a Japanese sniper who had Doss in his sights. And every single time he attempted to shoot Doss, his gun jammed.
Oh my gosh.
Coincidence? I think not.
It's literally a God thing.
Okay.
There's no other way to describe it.
I'm going to plug something here.
Go for it.
It's for the movie that I guess I haven't worked on the movie, but I've been working for the company who is making the movie. Coming out on June 9th is The American Miracle. It is about not the same thing. It's about the beginning of the country, beginning of the United States, with telling the story of George Washington. And basically the same thing happening to him. Like, they tell the story of an Indian chief who had multiple of his braves shooting guns directly at Washington and just somehow missing. And, there's, he gets pegged in the Bible that's in his chest pocket and stuff like that. Like, all those things that just seem to defy coincidence. And the point of the movie is it's not coincidence. We believe that it was God. And I don't think that it's a stretch to say that was happening to Desmond Doss as well. Like, he showed all this faith, and it's well placed. It's definitely worth its weight in gold. Like, it's not that he expected to get anything out of it. He was just doing his diligence, and again, putting others before himself, and God protected him through that.
Not only is it well placed, but I think the movie honestly does a great job of showing it. Just in my head, like, that it's not his strength. Mm-hmm. Like, there's multiple cuts where they show his hands, and they are bloodied from the rope. And, like, he doesn't have the strength to go on. But every time he gets to that ledge, he lowers the guy down. And like you said, he goes, just one more, Lord. Just give me one more. Mm-hmm. And it's like, strength comes from nowhere. And he's able to go find another one and bring that guy back. Mm-hmm. I think that's, if you start reading about wars, like, regardless of if it was older or more recent, that's just something that I think you can see is just there are times where an unnatural strength comes from nowhere. And I mean, regardless of if they were Christian or not at the time, I like to believe that that's just God being like, look, I've got a plan for you. The plan is that you're not dying here. The plan is that you're going to help someone else. Mm-hmm. We don't know I don't think we necessarily know what God's thoughts on the wars that we fight as humans, as sinful, broken humans. But I think that he uses the people that are fighting in them for his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the scene itself is also, again, it's a very stirring scene, a very powerful scene. Like, you're just glued to the screen. One of the things that really stands out to me is that that's a very good example, and I want to be a little careful with using this analogy, but I think it's a very good example of the fulfillment of the Christian duty. And what I mean that is a lot of war movies focus on like loyalty and brotherhood and like duty and like a lot, like, again, like fair, like guy liking type of thing. But I think like when you're a Christian, like it is, we have a responsibility, we have a duty we have to do as Christians, and it's not like we don't always know what's going to happen, but we have a responsibility. We have a charge. We're supposed to be ambassadors into this world. We are supposed to spread the gospel and lots of other things as well. And we also have to remember that, like, you know, whatever we do, it's for the glory of God, and it's also God moving through us. And throughout the entire sequence, like, you're seeing him, like, you know, he's not trying to do this for his own glory. He's just saying, Lord, empower me, work through me to do good in this world, to save another person's life. And he does it time and time and time and again. And again, he's not doing this for himself. He's doing it, but he's also like he's not rejecting what he has to do. He's recognizing that I have a responsibility and I'm going to fulfill it, but I can't do it on my own. And I'm calling upon God to help me and to work through me. And I think that's a very important thing to remember in your own Christian walk, is that, you know, whatever it is you are doing, whatever you're calling, I suppose you could say, or whatever, wherever you are in life, your mission, so to speak, kind of remains the same. It's to be the hands and feet of God. It is to be the hands and feet of God in any circumstance, wherever you are. But you can't do that on your own, and you need God to be working through you. Even if you don't know what is going to be the ultimate end, even if it doesn't seem like there is being much done, that you still have a responsibility, and you have to accept that. But you also have to accept, like, you know, it's not a you thing, it's a God thing, and he's working through you.
I was curious if they actually filmed at the Hacksaw Ridge, but they did not. They filmed mostly in Australia and at quarries, actually, for the actual cliff faces, and then, you know, did whatever they needed to for the actual war scene. So that's interesting.
Australia, war zone, kind of the same thing.
Wikipedia also describes the themes. It says this directly. The film has been described as an anti-war film with pacifist themes, which is interesting that it goes that route, because obviously the point is to show that it's not glory, or it shouldn't be glorified. But would you call it a pacifist? It's weird because it's showing things like they're stepping that line of being authentic, but then they're like, don't do this.
I really know if it's
bad.
I think you can say it's an accurate depiction of some person who is a pacifist and who very deeply follows that belief, even to like its logical conclusions. Even like when like he's literally being shot at, he refuses to fire at anyone else. So I think you could call it pacifist in that sense, where it's like focusing on that. But at least when I'm watching it, the film isn't saying you should be pacifist. It's simply saying this is a person who believes innately in this, and like he throughout the rest of the film he wrestles with that, but he continues to stand on his beliefs towards that. So yeah, I suppose it depends on how you define a pacifist film, but it definitely depicts it in a fairly positive light. I mean, it's not like being negative of it per se, but it's also not saying like you should be pacifist or anything, because it's kind of like a dramatic biography of sorts almost.
Yeah, it's a biography of a man and his opinions and his choices. I don't know if describing as a pacifist film is accurate. I think that's describing the person that we're following. And because that's who we're following and that's who our focus is on, it might come across as seeming pacifist. I don't necessarily know if this is even a theme that the movie is concerning itself with. I don't necessarily know if the movie is like, if who was it? Something Nolan, not Nolan. Who directed it?
Oh,
Mel Gibson.
Yeah, Mel Gibson.
Wow, Nolan.
No.
I don't even know if Mel Gibson was trying to convey like an anti or pro-war opinion on it. I think he was just trying to show what Desmond Doss went through.
I think it's.
like.
I mean, pretty much any modern war film is kind of anti-war in the sense that it generally depicts the brutality of war, and most people, when they see that, they don't like, oh, that's great, I want to go and fight in something like that. Like, no, most people aren't like that. Like, that's again, like, that's like the, if you're a state that's going to war, you want to use propaganda and say war is going to be great or whatever. Or as the young men who were going to World War I, they thought it was going to be over by Christmas, and all of that, like, you know, previous thoughts. Like, again, most of those ideas and notions about war and the glory of war are generally abandoned by this point, at least, especially in like the Western civilization, because we, you know, two world wars kind of dissuades you of those opinions of that.
But back-to-back World War champs, undefeated.
Undefeated.
I mean, you're not wrong, but there's a lot of nuance to that. But yeah,
This is the real Hacksaw Ridge versus the movie. It is pretty obvious that the movie used a quarry, but even still, it doesn't diminish the intensity of the story, and it's just more for the shock, I guess. I was gonna just talk a little bit more before we wrap up about Doss's faith. I think one of the most powerful scenes is where everybody is waiting for that last charge, and they're like, the commander over the radio is like, "What are you waiting for?" And we're waiting for Doss to pray for us. Like, yeah. They saw a man save 50 men, and by his own admission, by the power or by the strength of God, and they're like, "Okay, we're gonna at least let this guy do his thing. We might not have to believe with whatever he believes, but we're gonna let him do his thing because I think there's something going on here." And I would almost argue that this movie is Desmond Doss's personal testimony. I don't know where he ended up later in life, or if he continued in this belief. I'm sure he did.
If you watch, like, at the end of the film, like, they show him as an old man, and I think he died after the film or before the film was like released.
I believe he got to see the film
or something. It was something like that. It was close to it.
Never mind. He died in 2006, but people had plenty of interviews with him by then.
Yeah.
But I do think that this is a testimony of his own faith, and could be something more, or is something. It is that level of a faith film, I believe.
And that's the other thing I really like about at least the character of Desmond Doss. And again, as far as we can tell, at least he seems to be a very humble person. Like, the very fact that he says, "I think it was only 50," and like some people say, "No, it was more." And like throughout the film, you kind of see that character of humility, and humility is a virtue that I think is very lacking, especially in today's age. And so it's one of those things that really irks me when people are arrogant all the time. And you see this, especially like in like war movies all the time. Like, there's like, you know, the arrogant, "I've fought in this thing," or "I've done this thing," or "I'm a general and I've done whatever." And even people who have accomplished incredible and great things are often like arrogant about it. And the fact that you have someone who, as I've kind of already talked about, like, recognize the responsibilities he has, but only chooses to like say, "Just God, work through me in this circumstance, and I'm going to trust you and just do my job as the best I can." And then afterwards, like, you know, and is still humble about it afterwards. I think that's a great testimony, as you just said. Like, that's a great testament to a person, and I think that's a good sort of model you can also think about in your own life. It's like, again, you know, we have our responsibilities. We are the hands and feet of God on earth. And, you know, that's kind of a pressure, but at the same time, Christ is with us. And at the same time, you know, it's not about us, you know, it's a grateful thing that we're able to do. And we should be humble about that as well. And in our testimonies, and through that, we can be a great witness to the rest of the world.
I think that, especially what you were saying, Seth, with that final scene where they're waiting for him to finish praying, I think that's kind of the mission that we are called to do. We are supposed to be a great witness, and we are supposed to be such an example that people are willing to stop and ask, and they're willing, not I mean, out of respect, some people probably will, but also just out of like, how are you so devoted to this? Like, I mean, in his case, how are you so devoted to this that after everything you've seen and everything you've gone through, how are you still willing to follow this? It forces people to ask questions about our faith, and I would be intrigued how many. It's hard because it's the Pacific Theater. of World War II, and so probably not a lot of those men ended up getting to go home. But I would be intrigued how many of them asked Doss questions about faith, and how many of them visited the chaplain. And I'd be intrigued how many became Christians from that.
Yeah. Personal testimony can be very powerful.
Yeah.
All right. We good? Covered it?
I think that pretty much covers all I got to say about it, I guess. Yeah.
It's not even an hour.
I've been shooting for an hour. It's
Shortest episode yet.
No, I've been shooting for an hour for the sake of editing and just making sure we have time limits. So, because some Nolan Bros episodes have gone into the 2-hour range. I'm like, oh boy. All right. Thank you guys for joining me and talking about this. I'm not going to make you watch Hacksaw Ridge. That's the other thing, is we don't endorse war movies or say that you need to watch them, especially if you have a weak stomach, but they really open your eyes to something. And I think this one also opens your eyes to something in the Christian sphere, being able to look inside yourself and say, what is my level of self-sacrifice? Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like, what's my level of gore that I can handle? It's what am I willing to do something like that for the sake of somebody else, put somebody else's needs before my own. So
war films are just like great for like, what would I do? I think that's a very prevalent question you can ask for a lot of those, which again, one of the reasons they're so powerful or can be powerful.
Yeah. And we pray that we never have to experience that.
Yeah. World War III, baby. Round 3. Let's go.
No, let's not do that. Okay. Wrap it up.
This is definitely a bit more somber of an episode than usual. Not very many jokes kind of getting cracked around, so.
I know.
Probably why it's so short.
I mean, if I wanted to, I could put out so much black humor and dark humor, especially. But I'd rather not.
100%.
Knock your socks off. And your feet. I don't know.
And your head too over. I don't know.
It'll shock you from head to toe and everywhere else. I don't know.
He really lost his head with that one.
Oh, no. Okay. Thank you for watching or listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram or wherever. And then share this with a friend. Until next week, you know that you're loved. God bless.
All right. See you later.
See ya.